Hey guys, this is your host of Lit Literature, JP, aka The Demon. Just wanted to give you a quick forward. This is our second set of side episodes that are taking place in between Book 1, The Way of Kings of the Stormlight Archives, and Book 2, Words of Radiance. We wanted to put these out because these movies were coming out, and we wanted to experiment by reading the book first, discussing it, and immediately going to see the movie. So here is the first part of the Ready Player One miniseries that we're putting out. Episodes 8.5, parts 1 and 2, is A Wrinkle in Time, and episodes 8.6, parts 1, 2, and 3, Ready Player One. Cheers, enjoy. And we're live. Here we are, back again. It's the Shoutouts. This is your host, JP, aka The Demon, and we're going to talk some Ready Player One on this episode of Lit Literature. Woo. We are Okay, I said that. Yeah, we are definitely missing a few people, but we also have a few new people, at least one. We were supposed to have more, but at least we have one. And we have...
Yeah, actually count as 3 people.
And so the baker is joining us, new member of the Shoutouts.
That's me. I'm the baker.
Yo, baker.
He's really a baker. And then, of course, we're joined by the Cherry.
How's it going?
The Hitman.
Hey.
The Director.
Brett, the director.
And I already introduced myself. So we are missing the Captain, and Eam the Dream is dreaming in Europe somewhere. So that's good for him. And then we had another member that we were hoping to introduce to you, but we'll get him in another podcast when he's not roguing someone to death from behind in some video game somewhere. So anyway, Ready Player One. Let's go around and just get your thoughts. I'm going to start with the elder of us who lived through Ready Player One in real life.
All of it.
He's so old, he lives in the future.
I'm so old.
Right now.
Yes, I will start by saying that there was definitely some criticism that was coming out on the internet and with people in our group even about the book and the movie, maybe. And I was expecting for it to be worse than it was, and I actually enjoyed it very much. And I'm interested from the younger people in the group to see what the gripe is with it specifically, because I thought it was pretty good. I don't think it's like the best thing ever written. There were definitely points where you're just like, wow, this is just like a chapter of exposition, isn't it? And that was like a lot of chapters, but I kind of liked it just because I was like, oh, I remember that video game. Oh, I remember that. Oh, that was kind of fun. So like, I think the nostalgia really made it more interesting to me than probably maybe most people will find it.
Cool. Hitman, second elder.
Well, prior to agreeing to read this book for literature, I'd never heard about it, really. But overall, I thought the writing of it was, at best, good. At a lot of points, mediocre.
Yeah.
But the story overall, I found it enjoyable. I liked the characters overcoming it, and there's a lot of stuff as a gamer I could relate to, and like the wish that I could be in the VR world like that. Really, like, struck a chord with me. Like, it's so amazing to be in an oasis right now. But overall, I liked it. It's good.
Cool.
But I would not read it the second time.
Yeah.
Not a reread.
Gotcha. Cherry.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Ben that not a reread. I've kept drawing, especially in my mind, anyone who's seen Sword Art Online, there was quite a bit of, I'm like, oh, yeah, I've seen this before. But I think this was 2011 is when the author wrote this, and I don't know when Sword Art Online came out. But the whole concept to me, it was cool. There was a good amount of nostalgia in there and thinking of like little kind of messages or kind of like little sections
Easter
talking
eggs,
about
maybe?
Easter eggs, sections talking about things from the past, which I liked a lot. But it was a bit hard to get through the. I think a lot of it kind of similar to when we were talking about Wrinkle in Time was kind of heavy-handed. There wasn't very much subtlety to some of the themes and some of the kind of stuff that could happen to someone in this type of world. That was just kind of like thrown at your face and kind of slapped around a little bit, which I didn't like. I would have preferred a little bit more of a articulate way of showing this stuff to you. But other than that, I thought it was all right. It was fun to read, but definitely not one that I would go back to.
All right, Jerry, thanks. And Baker.
I hate it. It wasn't all bad. I mean, the parts that were good were definitely like the VR stuff. I mean, the just sort of trying to flesh out the idea of like what would the internet and the way we communicate with each other change in the future, and it's not that far in the future. Like how wildly like would that
Was it like
affect the way that we
2045.
44, I think 2044. Fact check.
Fact check. 2044.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Baker.
Yeah, like I enjoyed like the when he talked about like the suits and the hardware and like what sorts of things went into like making that experience and how it varied from like the high end rigs to like the low end, like it's just gloves and a pair of goggles or whatever. I liked that stuff a lot because I think that like isn't that far off. Like I think there are definitely some of those technological advances visible from now, but.
All right, and then I'll do a quick one, and then we'll pick some topics. I'm going to start a few topics first to both love and tear apart. So I thought overall it was good, and I'll leave it a good. As a matter of fact, on the Demon's 10-point scale, I'm going to give it a 6.5. Now, what saved it?
Not a 6.66.
I'm saving that. That's the best. That's the best ranking.
Don't blow your load on
do
this.
that.
The only ranking better than a 10.
So reasoning for that. It started out, I realized the writing was okay, like you guys mentioned.
Yeah.
It wasn't the best. Something that saved it, though, character development. I was, at first even, I was kind of like, I don't know if I like this. I was thinking that in my head. And then I was just probably a little bit into it. I just got absorbed. It didn't matter anymore. Not even the writing style mattered. I was just kind of like rolling with the punches in this. And that's always a good thing in my mind. Whenever a story accomplishes that, at least there's some good core story there. So that was good. The nostalgia was actually pretty good for me. It wasn't maybe as good as Brett's, but I did like some of that. But also some of it was too ridiculous for me as well. So it was a good combination. But all the same, I did like a lot of it. I liked a lot of the uniqueness in the world. There were post-apocalyptic / post-global economy, I guess, issues, even though a lot of them, in my mind, were far-fetched, even for... like the stacks, like we were talking about, the stacks and things like that. The one thing I loved, though, is how the foresight of the Oasis becoming a humongous economic powerhouse, and how Oasis cash became real currency, and you were using it in-game and out-game and trading it, and because all business was suddenly going through Oasis, just being the hub. And I actually really liked that idea when they were creating the Oasis, how it started as just a virtual MMO.
Yep.
And then they were like, no, this is going to starting to become a platform. This is a platform.
And with the advent of cryptocurrency right now, like that's like he didn't write this when Bitcoin, was starting to become a thing. Like it is kind of interesting to see that like that is the most believable part of the book is that like
the currency
that some MMO turns into like the global currency.
That foresight, man.
And I was also sorry to interrupt
Go ahead.
but I was also thinking when I was reading it, I also was kind of thinking like because we were talking about with A Wrinkle in Time how some of those things are like. But that was written so long ago, and it's like, wow, it's amazing that they were able to kind of foresee these scientific things that come up later.
Yeah.
But with this, I just think it's funny that we can kind of say the same thing about a book that was written 7 years ago only. Because that's how quickly technology advances. It's like, oh, he foresaw, Bitcoin before it even came out. It's just this was like 6 years ago.
It's not a
it's not a huge
jump to
nine.
things.
Yeah.
Bitcoin. One thing that
But
I
it was
thought,
not big or anything.
Yeah.
But one thing that I thought
But I
was
guarantee you at the time, though, there were people that would be like, that could never happen.
Oh, yeah. One thing that I thought was hilarious, when I first started reading this, I did not know when it was first written. And one of the first things that I noticed is when they were going through and they're like, oh, each avatar has to choose their own unique name. And this one's, or like, I had 3 choices, or like the first name, what's his name? It's Parsival. But he's like, first I wanted for Percival, and then it was like Parsival, and then he like chose like a third one, and I'm like, you do realize that like now you can't even get like the most ridiculous name without 8 letters after, or 8 numbers after it, which I thought was kind of funny, because I'm like, oh, this must have been written in the 90s or something, when like you think now email addresses, you have to go through your first and last name in like 8 combinations before you get to one that you don't have to add a number or anything like that.
Yeah. My email address is my name.
I actually, as long as I use my real name somewhere, I have not much. But I will say that in college, I was number 3. So
prestigious.
Oh, but man, that does make me laugh about how they went to school and they're like, oh, we had to give everyone the real name. Also be like Buttlicker 55.
Yeah.
Well, there was the like when he was doing the tech support for IOI at the end, and he's like talking to like some like it was something like Buttlicker 69.
It was literally something like that.
It was literally it was something.
yo, why can't I use my sword?
I'm not line of level or whatever.
But yeah, like if that's like in a game might be funny for one game, but if that's gonna be a name for like
your account?
why would people still choose that?
What I thought was weird was in a game where everyone's anonymous, why do they care if you have the same name as someone else? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, you'd
There's
think
a
there'd
lot
be
of-
like a background ID or something.
There's a lot of
there's
a lot of games now where it's like, well, like if you want to like friend someone or something, you just need to like their email or some like piece of information that they're willing to share with you. But like, it doesn't matter if your names are the same.
Yeah,
Just like
that's
in
a good
real
deal.
life, your names can be the same.
Right.
That's a good point.
It's not
Like,
it's not a huge deal.
They all get a serial code, and
But-
then that's not visible.
But it felt very much like okay. So my biggest problem with the book in general was like it had this weird like it felt like it was supposed to be futuristic, but it was written with characters that sound like they were talking from like the early 2000s using like leet speak and like all this weird shit, and like it was this weird like dissonance between like the people they were trying to portray acting like a person from the 80s that talks like someone from the early 2000s.
Well, see, there was also part of me kind of felt like that was part of getting into the whole era that you needed to know to win the competition. Like they had to become experts of the 80s and 90s, and I felt like they just kind of like started like it became almost like another rebirth of that culture into a current subculture.
For what Mike was saying, in the 80s and even early 90s, there was no leet speak.
Yeah,
Yes, there
like,
was.
No, not in the 80s and the 90s.
I mean, I remember using it in like AOL chat rooms when I was in.
Yeah, but that was like in early 2000s.
No, I graduated high school and.
Yeah,
2000s.
maybe late 90s, but like leet speak and stuff like that really
So the one,
wasn't a thing.
regardless of whether leet speak was around in the true 80s or
I mean, it wasn't
they're-
around in the 80s, but it was definitely around in the 90s.
And
Yeah,
also,
maybe
you got to
early
remember
90s,
too.
like
There's
like
a little bit
early
of
to
bleed,
mid-90s.
right? There's a little bit of bleed, right? So when you get up where they are at like 2044, you realize that like looking back to the 80s, you're gonna mix stuff from the 2000s and 90s into it by accident.
I mean,
Just
right,
yeah,
but there's-
there was stuff in the book. I mean, it was all
yeah, but
Not
the,
everything was
the one thing
specifically from the
that I
80s.
agree with you big time on that as a writer, but also you, is if I was writing these characters, I think it would have been really interesting to one, differentiate between characters that are in the competition as what was that? Gunters, or just general people, and what would the dialogue of people from 2044 be versus
Yeah.
people not? How would it fuse with the Gunters, with their obsession with the 80s, and what would this new kind of
Yeah, that
2040 language, kind of like how would it have fused? How would the obsession with the 80s because of this crazy, phenomenal Oasis game have fused with what was going on? You know what I mean? Like it probably would have made some hybrid
Right.
baby of some crazy sort.
Almost like what is it called? Whatever they speak in the Die Antwoord videos, like
My gosh.
South African. Like
Yeah.
you hear some English, you hear some whatever they speak Afrikaans.
It would have been
It's
interesting
like
to have characters outside of the competition to
Yes.
just hear what like a normal human being
It might have
sounds
been
like.
cool. Like just
They touched on it a very little bit with some in the later chapters when they start meeting some of them in real life, and it was like, oh, my mother did this or my family did this, and
Yeah.
I guess a little bit when they talked about the old lady when he's climbing down the scaffolding, that she would log in and go to church and sit in this
Yeah.
giant congregation. I wish there would have been more of that.
It felt very much insulated in like what nerd culture would have been like in that time or something.
Yeah,
and like
the gamers and
what
stuff.
game like true gamers would be like in that time.
Yeah, it makes sense because they would not associate with people outside the thing unless they had to outside. The
Yeah.
group.
it's pretty interesting, but I think that left corner Brett. There you go. Sorry, just directing the director. No, I think just interestingly, there was certainly some just crazy vibes that I felt while reading this. But the good thing is that I did appreciate the story itself, and it definitely sucked me in because I didn't stop the last whole chunk of it. I pretty much plowed through.
It had good pacing. Like,
Yeah,
it
pacing
kept
was pretty good.
It kept you moving forward pretty
Thank
well,
you,
I think.
director. So, anyway, let's go topic picking, and then let's drive this home. So, we'll just go in the same circle, I think. Elderberries get to pick first.
Gross.
You get to pick your topic first.
what topic? I
Any
want a
topic you want.
You bring up a topic. I
All
want
right,
a topic.
I'll bring up a topic then. Actually, we should let Ben do it.
I was not prepared for topics.
Yeah, I have a topic.
told those
Since when are we
topics.
coming up with topics?
I was putting it on the spot.
I had a topic. One thing I wanted to talk about is did anyone else kind of, especially through the beginning a little bit, get the idea that Halliday was kind of a self-conceited jerk a little bit?
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
not like that, but it's funny because I couldn't ever get a good feeling on what he was like until I really sat back, and then I was like, so he essentially, the little bits you get, he fired people from work if they didn't like the same things he did. He decided when he died that he needed everyone like to essentially love the same stuff he did. And I guess they tried to go back and make it a bit more of a nostalgia thing even for Halliday. But to kind of, like, I kept getting this, like, is he just, like, a really nice guy who's, well, you want to think that he's this nice guy who wants everyone else to enjoy, like, be like, this is a great time, and this is the stuff I loved, and I want everyone to experience that again, because those were, like, the good old days. Or is it also maybe this kind of, like, grumpy old guy who's like, man, the 80s were, like, so good, and, like, everyone needs to recognize that this was the best time of their lives.
I never got like a grumpy vibe from it. What I got from it is that he's just kind of antisocial. He doesn't really know how to interact with people properly. He had no game with girls, obviously. And I just feel like he was kind of a shut-in, and this was the world that he lived in almost exclusively. And he felt a connection with people that also had that connection. You know, this was the thing that he related to with people.
Yeah.
And he probably had almost nothing to talk to people about unless it was something related to these things.
I kind of agree with that. I also think that it wasn't the point to really make him necessarily a kind guy. You think about it, he's like a super genius CEO type who has a vision that's beyond what is kind of visible to normal people. And also he had terrible social skills. So I think really it was exactly that. I don't think he was trying to be an asshole, but I'm sure that he was to everyone
Yeah.
who was not in his like circle.
I mean, and even he says,
Yeah.
like, in the kind of in certain parts where they say he couldn't or he didn't interact with girls at all unless it was like inside of kind of a game. I wish they would have given more of that, like what was his personality like in the game, because obviously he's a super user, but it would have been cool if they had like stories of like him running around roaming, like doing these amazing feats with like huge clans and stuff, but they
Yeah.
didn't ever touch on that.
I thought he only actually ever talked to Kayla, and that was only in D&D.
Only
games.
in the D&D.
And not like even in like.
Oh, even in like the
uh,
other games.
I'm not sure. Like,
So-
that's one thing I remember offhand.
So I'm gonna go to the next topic. What do you guys think about these haptic suits, and where do you think that technology is really gonna go? Because my personal opinion is we're gonna surpass haptic suits. We're gonna be like neurologically connected before we have haptic suits that advanced.
Yeah, I wonder because, I mean, it seems like VR is coming now, but I kind of get like a feeling that VR is actually not going to become a mainstream thing for like another 10 years, so it may not actually become super... Like, I think the technology is getting there with VR, but I don't know if it's going to quite catch on. It might be kind of like a lower non-mainstream thing for a while.
Yeah, one of the things that I was kind of disappointed that they didn't talk about in the book is that like the biggest problem with VR right now as it stands is that it's way too fucking expensive.
Yeah.
Like there's no way that anyone other than, you know, affluent are going to have the ability to even purchase these things in the first place. And like, yeah, he was in a shitty spot at the beginning of the book, but like the only way he could get his hands on anything was through school. And they didn't really talk much about like, could poor people get the, like, I guess people in the stacks had them.
They must have had to be able
They must
to
have had to
somehow.
have been able
Yeah.
to get something.
Yeah, I was never sure if he get to keep the school set.
Like
as a
after you
basic
leave
set
school.
after you graduate, or
Yeah, I don't know. Probably.
Well,
not.
they definitely mentioned at some point if he dropped out of school or something like that, he would have it taken away.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I don't know how that goes with graduating, like if you complete
Yeah.
the full course or not. But
I wonder what the path for like. I honestly, if this whole book had just been about school in VR, I would have been so much more on board. It would have been so much more interesting. Because like all this stuff where it was like, there's no bullies. Like,
Yeah.
bullies are just people that are like annoying to you, and you're just
And
like
just mute 'em.
Mute
That
'em.
is-
Oh my
and, then,
gosh.
and then you're done, and it's like, wow, that actually would change a lot about like how
Education.
See,
people educate themselves.
this is the thing,
how
though, is
high school
I
experience
wonder
is.
if it would work that way because we basically have that right now with the internet. Like, you cannot look at comments, but people have to look at the comments.
right.
They gotta know what's going on. I have a feeling like...
I feel like it's different when people are talking to you like in person compared to someone that's like writing a message like.
Well, and the funny thing is how happy he was that he was like, they even know that you muted them because they see that you, and it's like that's such a like kind of an F you thing to be like, boop, bye.
So I feel like the trolls are gonna be the people muting,
Yeah.
not the ones that
Yeah,
need
that's a
to
good
mute
point.
people.
Listen to me.
Do you think it would have changed though? Like people posting shitty stuff in chat rooms and stuff might not be as big of a problem because you're in VR all the time. Everybody deals with each other, not technically face to face, but like if you were in that situation in a VR space where you're talking directly to someone, even if they're virtual, you're not just like people are nicer to people in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would definitely like cut down on a lot.
I kind of
that,
agree
like,
with that.
toxicity.
I do
Oh,
agree
yeah,
with
that's a good
that.
point.
actually.
Would it though?
That's a
Because
really
I
good
feel
point.
like even though you're not like looking through the eyes of your character, I feel like MMOs have a little bit of that going on already. Where like, for example, when I was like living in Japan or something like that, like I would play World of Warcraft with people back in the US, and it would have this weird effect of almost feeling like you're hanging out because you have no other option. It's just too far in real space. But even though I could still have that connection with my friends, the people I didn't know were dickheads still, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like the people that you don't know, I think will still have that kind of trolly nature because
Yeah.
it's like, well, I can have this anonymous, you're still, I think the anonymity is what causes that more so than the face-to-face thing. I feel like if you could be anonymous face-to-face, people would be assholes all the time.
That's true.
But the thing is, I feel like in this book, when you're in the VR, for most people, it's more real than reality. And
Yeah.
so they conduct
That's true.
themselves as they would normally.
Right.
The assholes are still assholes, and the good people are still good people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe not everyone saw it that way. But I felt the majority of people in the book was like, "This is way better. I'm gonna live in this world."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there'd be a lot of people that would value their handle as if it's their identity.
Yeah.
But then there'd also be like the butt
would be,
lickers that
yeah.
wouldn't.
So now,
Yeah.
now I'm going to take the next topic to level R, and we got to talk about this strange haptic sex doll that he had.
Oh, we gotta talk about that.
After he broke up with
Best part
Artemis.
of the whole book.
The one time he mentions it, he just chucks it. He chucks it, and I was like, "How does this thing work?"
He had it
Come
for like
on,
a
man.
whole week or
Yeah, he
something,
had it
right?
a
Or
week.
2
A couple
weeks or
weeks.
something. Yeah. And then, what was really funny is he was like, he's like, what made me throw it away is I realized that it was just masturbation. And I was like, okay, why did
Yeah.
you?
The whole
Well, now you just have to masturbate.
Yeah. That was my exact same thought. I'm
you're still gonna mention.
Exactly. Yeah, like, so why take away, like, that's like being like, I got rid of my car so I could walk every day because I realize when I'm driving, I'm just driving to work. Driving
It's
there,
really convenient and great.
I know. That was my whole point. I was like, why?
I also felt that like he said, like that's all he did. Like,
That could be a
because
problem.
of
But if he
course.
said more, but that's not the reason he used for throwing it away. The reason he said was because he realized it was just masturbation. It was like, yeah, but okay.
Yeah.
So I thought that was
And then
really
he
funny.
went on to talk about how like masturbation was super important.
Yeah.
And I was like, so which is it?
That's because it was in the almanac.
Speaking of
Yeah.
this, though, did you guys hear about the poem that's circulating online? That's like one of the reasons that people are like hating on Ernest Cline in general because they think he's an absolute creep.
No.
Oh, so it's the worst part to have in the back of your head while you're reading this book, and it probably shaped my opinion a little bit. But so one of the big problems is that he released this book that's like a book of poems and stuff, and it's like it has some really horrible narcissistic title like "Earnestly About Me" or something like that, something horrible that's like some play on words with his name. And there's this poem in it that's about how he's going to totally turn the porn industry on its head by creating non-misogynistic porn for geeks and gamers, where it's not about how pretty the girl is, it's about what her D&D stats are or something like that. And that sounds bad enough on its own, but like the reason people had so much backlash about it is that it's basically like he's like, I'm not going to be a misogynistic asshole and objectify women for their looks. I'm going to objectify them for how well they do trigonometry.
Right.
And like literally like that's the tone of the poem is that like he's like, she's going to be so smart and it's going to turn me so hard and it's going to blow your minds and your balls like and it's going to change the porn industry, and it's like horrible. It's really, really bad. And I think a lot of that came out in the book subtly, like the stuff about masturbation and the stuff about I hated the whole relationship between Artemis and Percival. Like it's the worst relationship ever.
Well, I mean, this is a thing that I feel like. I mean, I feel like even gamers today, some of them might get some of it, but like gaming and like tech has become much cooler than it used to be. Like it's still not like super cool, but like it's much cooler and has a much bigger following than it used to.
Yeah.
Like back when I was like programming or whatever in high school, even like. Nobody thought that was cool.
Like, oh,
nobody was like, "Oh, you're gonna
nerd
be rich."
and-
Everybody was like, "You fucking dweeb."
You're gonna be in your
Yeah.
basement, your mom's basement with
Exactly.
a computer, like war games, like the movie.
I have a
That's
feeling
like
this
Cartman.
guy grew up in a time where being like this was very kind of like secluding rather than including. Like nowadays, you have a whole community that you can get to. There really wasn't that much of that. It was just you kind of did it off on your own. Like there wasn't online video games. It was mostly just like self-playing video games. It was just I feel it was a very different time, and I can understand why he would feel so like secluded and maybe like bad with girls, because a lot of them were back then, you know.
Times have diddly changed.
They've changed a lot.
But even though not that much since, well, I mean, it has definitely, but not since 2011 when he wrote it. And you get I thought I got the feeling a little bit that even from the writing style and from kind of the way that he's the author was the one who was back in that time.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was kind of a cool thing.
I would say
interesting.
anyone who skips their way off to like an ASEN would know, hands down, that times have changed a little bit.
Exactly.
So, but there's still a lot of that rooted there.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting. I didn't know about that poem, Baker. That's pretty.
It's
really
interesting. I'm not saying that like he's gonna be my favorite person in the world, but I have a feeling that there's probably more to the story. Maybe I don't know.
Maybe. And yeah, it's like one of those things where like it doesn't make him a horrible person because he wrote a poem.
just a little
about
weird.
It is.
Yeah.
It's super weird, and it probably answers some questions that you had about like things that you didn't even know
Exactly.
about. But it is
Art.
It's bad.
I love art. All right, we're going to move on to a new topic now. I could pick another one, but I would prefer to leave it up to you guys unless you want me to.
Well, the only topic I have specifically is just the adaptation predictions. So
We're going to get to
you can
that.
let me know when you guys are ready to move on to
Okay.
those.
Well, one thing I will say, I did have a huge moment when I was reading the book, and it was just my "what the fuck is going on" moment. Was they set you up with this like story of kind of there was the Halliday who is the creator, and then his best friend, kind of nerdy D&D partner who was like the business
Yogi?
side, and
Og.
yeah, who ended up being Og, and he's the businessman, and he's the one who like was actually able to communicate people, and the person who got him to go through. And then they had this hard time 10 years ago, and they broke up, and now Og never really goes into the system anymore. And then pan you to
Quote,
this like he never goes into the
kind of.
system. Then it pans to this like image of this old guy who's throwing a rave on a PvP zone in the middle of this giant like essentially people are trying to find the Easter egg, and he invites the two people who are like, we probably shouldn't go to a PvP zone, and he's like, you should come and party at my rave. And I'm like, this is a 70-year-old businessman who like ran one of the most successful businesses.
Dude.
Granted,
That
he's a
would be
gamer
me.
nerd, but
That would also be me.
but still for me,
Screw
I
it.
just in my mind, I'm like, what is going on?
We know Josh is going to be
Why?
the boring, successful
But
businessman.
why
I can
is
tell
the
you,
rest of us are
inviting them
going
to
to
the
be...
PvP zone, knowing that they would be targets to
Because
get
he's a
killed.
boss, man.
In
He's a
Josh's
boss.
defense, I have a feeling that I know why that scene exists specifically. And it seems like, because I didn't know this when I was reading it, but the whole time that I was reading the book, I'm like, this reads like a 1980s, 1990s movie script. Like, it's basically a movie. The way it's structured, the way it plays out, the way it's a little campy at parts. It's
Especially the love story.
the love story is so 90s
yeah.
like mainstream movie, it's not even funny. And apparently this guy actually wrote scripts. He's originally a screenplay writer. So what I think this was is it's what we call in screen lingo a tentpole moment. It's literally just put there to be like eye candy because you can put it in the trailer and it'll sell the movie. And I think he's just used to thinking like that. He's just like, I need a tentpole. I'm gonna have this really cool flying around scene. And even though it's a book, I think he still put it in there.
That's funny. That would make more sense, because I was just kind of like, even the whole idea.
I agree with you though. It didn't make sense for them to be
Right.
like, no, yeah, we should totally go to this PvP zone.
It's because it's the
And it's
odd.
too
He does it
you
every
go
year,
through
man.
movies,
Yeah.
but
He does it
lots
every
of
year.
tentpole moments that make no sense.
But he's also a kind of a D&D nerd, and like this, like he's I
He's
keep going
the
back.
odd.
He's the old like 80-year-old guy who leaves, and this is the other thing. He leaves the company and goes and starts a not-for-profit to help children. And then he's like, but every once in a while I log in and go to this rave. And it's like, what?
No, he
Who
logs
is
in
this
and
character?
hosts the rave.
So you
Every
can't
year
host
he
the-
hosts the rave.
can't
He
be a-
doesn't log in and go to one.
You get a
And then,
philanthropist
I
and
know,
a
I know.
badass raver at the same
secondly,
time.
he retired and starts a nonprofit after making $5 billion worth
Also,
of...
they make it very clear that he is like that warm, inviting,
Yeah.
sociable character.
They do that
like, he's
kinda
the
later.
antithesis of Holiday, like
Holiday,
in every
yeah.
way.
And
Yeah.
not to mention...
But when you first meet him, I just was like, what
Yeah.
the fuck is going on? Why
just
are
ima-
they going to a rave?
I just
And why
imagined
is
like
it
a
hosted
giant
by an
Santa
80-year-old
Claus looking
guy
motherfucker up there, like
up there,
zero
like-
discs, like
I know
That is exactly what I thought.
But for me, that was just like, this is so weird. And then I'm like, I know something's gonna happen.
Dude,
like they're in a PvP
my-
zone. That they wouldn't have explained that they're in a
Time out.
PvP zone for that.
Well, if he wants it in PvP zoning so that more exciting things happen.
Yeah.
And you can tell that he's there to like kind of enjoy the view.
Yeah.
But my view, per what Baker just said, my view was literally like a Master Roshi type. Like he was chilling there, fatter than Master Roshi, Hawaiian shirt, sunglasses,
Turtle
big
shell.
beard, DJ. That was it. That's what I got, man.
the thing-
and like even the location was like it was the exact opposite of Anorak's Castle. Like Anorak's Castle is a place where nobody can go to, nobody can participate. There's no PvP. It's just there and it looks pretty and leave it alone. But then like you've got Og's place on a PvP planet. Fuck bitches. Every 420.
Wait, so where is this place?
Yeah, it's the exact opposite.
That's funny.
But the thing we didn't know at the time was that Og was a super user, so he figured if he invited these guys,
We
there-
assumed that he was powerful.
Well,
But yeah,
We didn't know about super user status, and yeah, he's probably maybe got some special items, maybe. But he could be like, nope, all viewers is dead, wave a hand, if he felt like it.
Yeah, like
when he
sure.
did lasers or something, and he just shot them all down.
It could just
Right.
be like bait for the what do they call them, the Sixers
The
or whatever?
Sixers.
It's
Yeah.
just like-
honestly,
yeah.
it probably was.
It probably
For-
was.
From his perspective, it was probably
Six
a
or
great
eight.
opportunity to get rid of a bunch of assholes.
Sixers.
Yeah, as we find out, I mean, he was kind of tasked to help in a way anyway.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
One of,
Kippy,
one of my biggest gripes though with the book, and it's somewhat of a nitpick, is that like the game and its rules, like the world of Oasis and the role playing game aspects of it, are like nonsense and they don't matter at all. Like and it's clear it was written by someone who's never played like an actual MMO before, because like he was just like pulling shit out of his ass left and right. He was just like, yeah, and there's space and shit. And fly. I don't fucking know, man. It sounds wild. Let's just do it. Type it in.
Also, then it's just like all of a sudden you're just like you're in a. It's funny because he's like there's technology and there's magic zones and you're flying
Yeah.
through the technology
Don't
zone.
stop trying to explain it. It's never gonna make sense.
Yeah, like all of a sudden
Actually,
your shit
so-
stops working and a mage has to cast you back out into space. Like what the frick?
Everything about it was like tearing me out of the book, especially because I've been playing a game where like you literally just fly through space. It's like a space trucking simulator. It's called Elite Dangerous. It's hilarious. It's amazing, but it's got VR and it's like super cool. So
Oh,
I was
that
like,
sounds fun.
it's got space in VR. It's gonna be great. And then he started talking about like the way the sectors are laid out and the way the space travel works. I'm like, you're wrong. That's factually incorrect. Like he talks about how like everything is 10 light hours long, so it'd take 10 hours for a top speed vessel to travel from one side to the other. And then constantly throughout the book they're like, and then we popped over to sector 7. I'm like, no you didn't. Because you just explained how everything's fucking slow.
And then
Everything
the
but
whole
trans-
teleportation.
instant
They also had the
transportation.
Well, yeah, but like
space travel.
the thing is that like
teleport.
traveling the speed of light in a galaxy-sized space is like slow as fuck.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
super slow. And then
But maybe it's game speed of light. Like it's not actual real world
Speed of light.
physics.
yeah, I
you
don't know.
what I
Like
mean?
he must have meant something that like if everything actually traveled the speed of light and everything was that far away
Right.
from each other,
Well,
everything would
the,
take hours to get to.
Also, the
no matter
scale.
what.
hundreds of billions of hours even with a teleport.
Yeah, the scale could also possibly be smaller than we're thinking. They may like planets may not be, you know.
Oh yeah, the planets are definitely like there are
They're, like-
planets that are probably smaller
Yeah.
than like
But-
planet-sized planet, I assume like these planets are probably just suspended in space. They're not actually like orbiting around
and stuff.
Yeah.
suns and stuff.
What I
but-
figured was like, oh, you can travel in game with the like spaceship at the speed of light, or you can spend the money
to tell,
and like teleport, and
Right.
it's not in game you're teleporting. It's just
Right,
sending
right.
it here to here,
and then you're there.
because it's a game,
Right.
And so it's like, oh,
Right.
so instantaneous.
Right, and
so it's
once
time.
they were like, oh, there's hyper gates and you teleport your whole ship and stuff.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, well at least that makes somewhat sense.
Yeah,
But it was really cute when he was like, and then they're escaping from the planet, and then I fired into light speed, and the stars streaked by, and I was like, well, no, you're going to light speed, and then the stars are like moving really, really slowly next to you, like you're traveling light speed, like that's not very fast.
especially when these are like hundreds of light
You're
years.
slowly pulling
yeah.
away from the planet at light speed, like it's a big thing.
Well, I think it's just
But,
images from
Yeah.
Star Wars.
Yeah, they want
totally.
like that.
It
They
totally
took those
is.
images
But it was-
and put those in the book.
And it's totally a
80s.
nitpick, but it was just like, that's cute that you think that that's how light travel works.
I think though that when you're telling a story, you always have to take creative license, you know.
totally.
And I think if you depicted it the way that actually is, you'd be like, that's
But
fucking boring.
My problem isn't with the depiction. My problem is with that he tried to explain like how it worked, and he clearly had no idea. Like how, he was like,
Well, I
"I don't
hadn't thought
fucking
through-
know, man.
yeah.
You go light speed or whatever."
So I have a bit. So like I said, we're actually going to close out soon and go to the next part.
Okay.
And talk film and what we think the film's going to go, etc.
Cool.
And then, of course, for part 3, we're going to see the film. But
Sweet.
the one thing I want to add on to that is, in terms of pure writing, the story was good, and he wrote a good story. But
I disagree entirely.
Well, no. Time out. Because I think I agree with Baker. I think that in terms of pure writing, he failed there because he did a lot to, and I think it comes from script writing because you have to tell a large story in a short amount of time normally. Mm-hmm. In a book, a good writer finds very creative ways to demonstrate those very real things, even taking creative license. And I think that's the one thing that I always caught, or that always kind of like caught on me, is it felt like it could be so deep.
Yeah.
But he never went deep. He brushed the surface and just gave it the kind of the light space or the this or the keyword. And he didn't like, I don't know, take that concept which he had which was, in my opinion, some of them were ingenious, and then like bury them into the story like people who come from that background. And I don't blame him for that though. Yeah. I think that's a learned. It's okay. I think that's a learned medium. And he's doing what a lot of people have to do the other way. They write books and they have to go
remove everything to get it to
go
film.
to screen. Yeah. You know, to go to the screen. It's like you gotta. It's a difficult task, and so I don't blame him for that. So that's my closing comments as I log back in and close us out. But we'll go round table real quick.
Part two, we're going to talk about the movie.
Part two, we're going to talk about
what we think
and whatever else.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could bring book into it as
stuff.
well. We got more stuff. Clearly, we're just getting started, folks.
The thing I want to ask you guys, because this is the thing that I'm really interested about, is the core problem that I have with the book is that the book is about Ernest Cline knowing a lot about 80s stuff, and everything good happens to him because he's really good at video games, and he saves the day, and he doesn't have any problems or challenges. Everything is just laid at his feet on a silver platter, and like that's the core problem that I have with it, is that like there is no story. The story is that a white guy plays 2 video games pretty good and knows all the lines in 2 movies, and then he wins the day and he gets the girl.
The actual story that I'm talking about, and this is going to throw a wrench in it, is the story about his real life, which is him overcoming his obsession of the 80s, putting a limiter on his gaming system so that it forces him to run on a fucking treadmill.
Yeah, but that's all horseshit.
That's not all horseshit. That's beautiful.
No, because the entire the entire book is like the real world doesn't matter, and then at the very end of the book they're like,
oh, it matters.
I actually don't think it's at the end.
And then
of the
at
book.
the end of the book they're like, but maybe it does.
But I think that's the growth. That's the realization.
I
feel
also-
like that.
There's no. I mean, yes.
I feel like his perception was more coming up against obstacles than his actual going after the Easter egg.
But his
agree.
growth is totally artificial. His growth is like he's like, well, I guess like other stuff's important too now that I don't have $1 million.
Disagree.
I kind of have to agree.
I disagree.
I have to agree with Baker because of one specific thing, especially towards the end, where they show like he's literally this normal person.
Finish.
He's this normal, like really poor person actually, and all of a sudden he gets all this money, and the first thing he does is go and lock himself in a room for a year, like a year or whatever. But he gets a romantic interest who says she wants to help people, and it doesn't come up again until the end when he's like, I'm going to stay outside and help people.
Now, yeah.
Now that he wins the money.
Oh, he's a good person all of a sudden, instead of being the guy that was like, obsessed fly a spaceship into the sun and just go out in a blaze of glory.
So I disagree, and that's cool. But I'm going to rebuttal that in part 2. And for that, folks, we'll see what happens.
Cheers.
Cheers.